Welcome back to Tales from the Bargain Bin. Going back to the realm of live action, we have a film called The Devil's Machine. This one is perplexing and honestly kind of sad because it's not great, but it has potential. It's about a man who has been called to verify the discovery of an allegedly cursed automaton. Before we go into the movie though, I think we should have a very brief history lesson on automata so that we can all better appreciate the subject matter in this movie. An automaton is basically a machine that performs a specific set of tasks once wound up in some way, such as a clock. An ancient example is the Antikythera mechanism, which was likely used to track celestial bodies and aid in navigation, though I mainly bring it up because I just love talking about it. I think it's really cool. But when people talk about automatons, they are generally referring to machines meant to give the illusion of life, such as the dulcimer player, which was made for Marie Antoinette in 1784 by David Röntgen. The thing that is fascinating about these devices is how they function. We want to see the complex inner workings, and they are complex, considering they allow these machines to draw intricate pictures and write poetry, all predefined of course, but still incredibly impressive. I think that they really serve to show that our ancestors weren't as stupid as we like to believe, they just didn't have access to the technology we take for granted. But enough highfalutin shit, let's talk about how this guy wants to fuck his daughter. Alright, first we have to talk about the opening. The movie begins with a bunch of what I believe are Scottish soldiers from the 1700s. They are carrying a trunk that clearly contains the doll lady from the back of the DVD, but they are stopped by a creepy British guy. This turns out to be a trap, presumably orchestrated by the doll, and everyone dies except one person from each side who both carry off the trunk together. Switch to modern day, and the main character Brendan finishes looking at the book he wrote on the Infernal Princess, and starts aimlessly pushing gears around while his stepdaughter Rose tries on clothes. This is where the main problem of the movie begins. We never see him actually working on any gearworks. This is the closest we get, but he is supposed to be an expert on the subject. It's like introducing a character and specifically saying they know fucking everything about sharks, but the most knowledge they ever display is, yep, that might be a shark. And lest you think I'm imposing too much expectation on this movie, the original title of the film was Automata. Anyway, problem 2 begins right after, but I will take part of the blame for this one. At first I thought that these two might be fucking. This is because A, I missed the family photo demonstrating that there was a mother at some point who is gone now, presumably dead of unknown causes, and B, I had a difficult time understanding what they were saying because of their accents. I mentioned before in my first review that I often have trouble processing what people say as it is, so this can make things difficult, but that's on me. I should have had subtitles on when I first watched it. But it's still a problem with them because there is sexual tension. Now, I'm not being a Puritan here, I don't care about that stuff in art, and also I don't actually know how old she is. Best case scenario, maybe she's actually 18 and he only married her mother when she was like 17. It would be weird for them to have a relationship, sure, but I think that would fall under none of my business. No, the problem is that I genuinely thought they were already fucking at several times. But it's meant to be a built-up situation, kind of like how in the movie The Shining, Jack is supposed to get crazier as the story goes on, but really he was a nutcase from the beginning.
Jack, don't worry, Mom. I know all about cannibalism. I saw it on TV.
See? It's okay. You saw it on the television.
But then a lot of people think that mess is a cinematic masterpiece, so maybe they'd like this too. Brendan gets a call and he and Rose are invited out to a Scottish house and we are treated to a rundown of the Infernal Princess's history. Basically, 300 years ago there was a general who was super proud of his daughter named Talia who he referred to as his princess. To immortalize her, he commissioned an automaton in her image. Talia then went missing and eventually the general was found dead. Everyone who was fascinated with her, including Ben Shapiro apparently, went mad and died due to various causes until one day the Infernal Princess disappeared. The man then explains that he thought the doll had made its way back to its creator and then claims to have found it in the hidden basement of the creator's rebuilt home, which they are currently in. Brendan is offered a deal, £1 million to stay in the house 1 week and use his expertise to authenticate the discovery by getting the doll to perform the acts it's supposed to perform. They finally unveil the doll and another problem arises. That is clearly an actress. Now, nothing against her, she does fine, but the pursed lips look she has going looks weird, and plain and simply, she's not a doll. What they could have done is had a doll that's more clearly fake, then they could switch it to one that looks a little more lifelike, and then at the end have it be the actress, and that would have been a nice effect similar to how Chucky transforms throughout Child's Play. Or just have a mask or something like that. Actually, now that I think about it, something that could have worked well is if they had the actress for all the out-of-focus shots positioned from a distance, and the doll for the up-close parts. This could have produced a nice corner-of-your-eye hallucination effect. Brendan and Rose read some documents that basically reiterate that the doll supposedly caused madness and death and maybe outright killed some people. The sequence isn't that important, but this shot is just... wow. I mean, look at it. Yeesh. The next day, they try to activate the first trick, getting her to raise her hand to be kissed. I will say I actually like this scene, having Brendan stand among the crowd in the past. It's an easy shot and not entirely original, but it's cheap and effective. Especially when a woman who is clearly Talia starts whispering to him. This is the first instance of the doll getting into his head. So Brendan nudges a spot on her back or something, then kneels and presents the rose and the princess raises her hand. How this works is kinda vague and is just another example of how this movie is missing the most interesting part of automatons. He says at some point that he can't find any workings, so fine, but then maybe show other automatons as an example? Also, sexual tension.
Don't forget about me.
The importance of this hand kiss is illustrated by spooky wind breaking a vase. They go over the documents while Rose sketches Brendan and they contemplate why the doll's creator, Alexander, would take her then disappear. Rose theorizes that he might have died in the fire that burned his original house down, but Brendan still thinks the documents have been forged and that the doll is a fake. Brendan uses his expertise to fondle the doll and we get a bad jump scare. Seriously, the vast majority of scenes like this would be improved by not adding the sudden loud noise. That night we have a dream sequence where Talia tries to seduce him and a connection is clearly drawn between her and Rose. The lighting is pretty decent at making the effect of a dream world, similar to A Nightmare on Elm Street. It is implied they shared the same dream, but they don't talk about it. He tries to get the princess to perform her second act, writing poetry, but it's not working. He looks outside and sees Rose dancing, and when he looks back, the princess has written a full page, and I guess thrown away the paper with the scribbles on it, but he ignores that. The problem is she wrote the wrong poem, but they settle on the idea that she might just be able to write several. In the real world, this would indeed be a possibility. The next act the princess is supposed to perform is she is supposed to speak.
Next, she speaks.
I wonder what she'll say.
If she does speak, it'll have to be pretty crude.
You mean like, fuck me, Brendan?
Rose,
What? That's crude.
you know that's not what I meant.
Did I?
Jesus, they are really not being subtle here, are they? Sexual advances aside, he's right. If the princess can speak, it would have to be crude. Automatons could play instruments and blow whistles and such, but there were no speaking automatons. Such a device would be incredibly complex, and this was well before the record player. The closest you could get, probably, is an automatic violin that would only be useful for imitating singing. For fun, here's a clip of an orchestrion. To learn more about that, you can find a link to the original video in the description down below. We then go straight into another dream sequence where Talia performs the same dance Rose was doing while Talia's father looks on creepily. Then Rose crawls into bed with him because she heard a noise or something. Do I need to say anything? When Brendan wakes up, he reads another document which is just a couple letters between the general and Alexander. Nothing of note is really added, they're just talking about how great the doll is gonna be. Brendan comes upon Rose drawing, but she won't show her drawings to him. He sees someone in the window, and the General's ghost sniffs Rose.
Nasonex treats congestion and other nasal allergy symptoms. Ask your doctor about Nasonex.
Brendan figures out the poem the princess wrote is a mix and match of different poems, but they were both written after she was created. This only adds to the puzzle as she still can't figure out how she works in the first place.
Still so much that doesn't add up. So far I've seen effects, but no workings. Whatever machinery drives her is very well hidden.
You're telling me. While investigating a tremble the princess supposedly did, he shoves his fingers in her mouth. He gets bit, and then we get a spooky chicken pose from her. Then after some teasing from Rose, he gives her a spank.
That's what you get for playing with dolls.
We then get to some softcore porn. Me and my brother actually had to stop the movie here, because while we were watching it, we had someone coming in and out of our house to do repairs, and I did not have it in me to play audible porn with someone in the house. I don't think the break really affected much of the experience, but do bear in mind that the flow of the film was disrupted by a couple hours for me. Anyway, if your brain is made up of wads of chewed up bubblegum and you haven't gotten the picture yet, this scene clearly spells out that the general was fucking his daughter and engaging in some BDSM with her. Brendan wakes up from this dream and is treated to what I can only describe as a half-baked comedy show you'd see on Adult Swim. The attempt to be scary here is outright laughable. He sees Rose talking to herself, and we see that she has whip marks on her back. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure whether this means she just had the same ghost dream from Talia's perspective, or if he really did whip her while sleepwalking. Either way, their relationship is pretty fucked up right now. Next, Brendan is trying to figure out how the princess was able to stand up and dance as described in the documents. He figures out that it's triggered by clapping, which is outright magic by the way, and then we get the highlight of the movie. I loved this scene. I don't know how they did it, probably by messing with the frame rate, but the effect here was very uncanny and effective. Brendan goes to look for Rose and finds her sketchbook, seeing that she has been drawing sexual fantasies. He goes to confront her, but mainly because the doll did the same dance Rose did earlier, making him think she has been trying to trick him. She claims she made it up and then finally makes it blunt that she wants to fuck him, throwing a fit when he doesn't reciprocate. But she goes to apologize to him for her behavior, and Brendan says he wants them to leave early, which would cost them the £1 million. He blames the house for their weird behavior, rightfully so, but she confesses that she learned the dance by reading about it and begs for them to stay. Like every idiot in every horror movie, he concedes. With only one day remaining anyway, they make plans to make an event of it, and Brendan makes one last attempt to uncover the truth about the princess. He looks under her skirt and I guess discovers a vagina?
Is that what he built you for?
Hey man, the general was just ahead of his time.
When will you people realize that robots are erotic?
The problem is that he should have discovered this the first day, because under the clothes is where pretty much all automatons hide their workings. It's so fucking laughable that this guy's an expert of any kind. Brendan uncovers a note from Alexander and finally learns all the secrets. The automaton the general had been boasting about having commissioned could not actually be built, so he had Alexander design a suit for an actress to wear instead, with the intention of staging Talia's disappearance and forcing her to perform. Exactly how much of this plan Alexander was actually privy to is not entirely clear, but he does bear guilt for it. It shows him taking her measurements, but that would imply she was aware of the plan in some way. But anyway, he and Talia were secretly in love, and when the general found out, he had her tongue cut out and forced her into the suit. She was supposed to be let go after the presentation, but she never was. Eventually, Talia came to him and he found that she had become a monster. She knocked him out and set the house on fire. He woke up and she blocked his exit, but kindly allowed him to write that long note. Silly acting aside, yeah, that story is pretty fucked up. Mildly confusing, but fucked up. Now here is where the movie goes full tilt into the supernatural, and it gets weird. Brendan is visited by the ghost of the general, who gives him a stern talking to about how it's his duty to fuck his stepdaughter.
For I shall take your devilish attributes and make of them a real man.
In just 7 days, I can make you a man.
We then get a bizarre sequence of poetry.
Rosebud, rosebud, rosebud red. There grows it ever, there blooms it yet.
Rosebud, rosebud, rosebud red. There grows it ever, there blooms it yet!
The next day, Brendan is clearly possessed. He scares the shit out of Rose, but it quickly turns erotic, of course. They have their last dinner at the house, which results in the discovery that Brendan has a feeder fetish. I get that erotically feeding someone is a thing, but pretty sure it's not usually deep throat this slice of cake. He also forces her to drink, presumably to make her pliable. From here on, it goes all over the place, so I'll try to get through it as succinctly as possible. Brendan carries Rose to her bed and ties her up, but can't bring himself to sleep with her. The general goes in her room and Brendan breaks in to find Talia. He whips her, but it's actually Rose, and he rejects the spirits outright. The general takes Rose, and Brendan is ushered through a party out onto the lawn. The general sends wolf-masked BDSM slaves to capture him, and he is tormented by soldiers. The general tries to cut out Rose's tongue, but Brendan pleads to Talia to let her go, promising he will stay with her. Rose is released, and Brendan, kind of stupidly, knocks Talia's head off. For some reason, they wait until morning to leave, and he sends Rose out first. He sees that Talia is still intact and that the general is about to kill Rose. This is just an illusion though, and he tells Rose to leave. He intends to stay like he originally agreed. Frankly, he is incredibly fucking lucky that Talia is still honoring the deal after he tried to back out of it. Rose then walks away because Brendan had the car keys. The end. This movie, I feel, is the soul of this series. It's not shitty propaganda, it's not a ripoff of something better, it's just an honest attempt at making a real movie. It has problems, sure. I think it's pretty clear this movie could have made better decisions, so it's not good, necessarily, but it's not bad either. Some effects were terrible, but others were cool. I can see what they were going for, and the Devil's Machine is probably going to stick with me. At the very least, I will think of it every time I see an automaton. Speaking of, I could harp on the lack of actual automatons displayed in this movie, but I think I've done enough of that already. The actors were also fine. The script may not have always been the best, but the three main characters did their jobs just fine. The movie mainly falters when it relies on cheap ghost effects. They try to go over the top with roaring and snarling, which I just can't take seriously. Overall, this movie would have been far more effective if it maintained a more subtle approach. Now, let's ruminate on what could have been. If we gave this movie a higher budget and tweaked the concept a bit and made whatever deals necessary to make this happen, I think it would fit right into a certain horror franchise, Hellraiser. Now I know the Hellraiser franchise has seen better days, like much better days, but bear with me here. I think this could have been a good entry. The Lament configuration, which is what the puzzle box is called, was made by a toy maker. The box itself is an automaton, as it has a predefined set of movements once you solve the puzzle. Remember, they don't need to be humanoid. In the movie Hellraiser Bloodlines, where you see the creation of the puzzle box, you also see the summoning of a demon into the flayed skin of a murdered woman. You see where I'm going with this? Just make the Infernal Princess more explicitly demonic in its very design, throw a couple Cenobites into the mix, and you've got a workable Hellraiser movie. The cover itself invokes this. I mean, look at those pins, they know what they're doing. This method of contorting an unrelated script isn't unfamiliar to Hellraiser either. Hell, the sequels to Cloverfield were unrelated scripts at first. But regardless of what could have been, what we got may have been downright silly at times, but it was original and memorable. Oh, and I also didn't feel personally insulted by it, so that's a bonus.